Earlier this year, we saw the release of the new Tissot PRX, a watch release that has been probably the most popular, more affordable release of 2020 so far, and for good reason. In my review, there was a lot to give the watch props for when it came to its case and bracelet execution for the price. And this is in a price range where a lot of brands tend to cut some corners in those areas. But as many are aware, the first run of the PRX came with a Swiss quartz movement, making some of those who love all things mechanical just having to lust after the eventual release of the automatic versions. Now, there have been some leaks over the past several months, making the anticipation of this new piece heightened even further. But now the day is finally here. We have all three of the new releases available. The Powermatic 80 versions of these PRXs here. So let's take a closer look at them. So just to provide a bit of an overview to begin here and what we're gonna look at in this video. First, understanding the origins of these PRXs, also offer an in-depth review of these new timepieces, and then understand how they stack up against the previous quartz variants, because I imagine there's going to be a lot of discussion and thoughts about which one is best for what type of individual. And then the final points of consideration at the end, just both kind of on the positive, negative, and also just in general when looking at these pieces, what is probably the best thing to consider when looking in the direction. And also before we jump in, I do want to mention that we do have these watches for sale on TeddyBaldassarre.com. We're a full authorized dealer for Tissot. So if you are in the market for these watches, definitely go check it out. We also have online consultations as well, where if you have any questions, we can answer those as well with a dedicated watch specialist. So to begin here, let's first look at the origins of these timepieces. Now, I think it goes without saying that the design formula for these models is nothing new at all. Now, the PRX family certainly is inspired by the surge of steel sports watches with integrated bracelets during the 1970s from the likes of the Royal Oak and the Nautilus. What is important to note is that Tissot managed to get in on the fun during the period by way of an early C-Star model from the late 1970s, and this name PRX also can stem back towards that general period, extending from a model line in the early 1980s. Now, PRX is an acronym standing for precise, robust, and the X being an indicator for the 10 atmosphere of water resistant rating associated with these models, which still of course stands true today. During this era of Tissot and just watches as a whole, quartz watches were very much a part of the norm, making the introduction of the PRX a few months back containing a quartz movement probably just making the most sense given the just context of these pieces. However, given the different collecting philosophies among enthusiasts, there was no question demand of a mechanical option would arise. And a short 4 months later, it is clear that Tissot was ahead of the curve in predicting this, making these Powermatic versions available. So I have reviewed the quartz version PRX, which I can link to in the description. However, in summary, the watch simply was definitely a hit for Tissot and offering, yes, a rather familiar design, but in terms of finishing and its attractive price tag, it became that fun go-to model for when one is looking to get the integrated steel sports design without paying the same price of a new souped-up Mercedes. In that previous video, I made the prediction that Tissot was probably going to price the automatic PRX between the price range of $700 to $800, but it appears I overshot it with my prediction, making this new automatic a very competitive price at $650. So this new trio comes with 3 different color options: a blue dial variant, a black dial, and a silver dial with gold accents, including a PVD bezel. Let's first begin with looking at the case. Now, quite frankly, this is not going to be a differentiating factor compared to the quartz versions. In terms of wear and finish, these cases are very much unchanged, apart from a slight increase in the case thickness that is not going to be very noticeable in wear, as it is still rather thin at just 11 millimeters. The previous versions were right around 10.5 millimeters. The case apart from this is unchanged. It comes in at 40 millimeters with its diameter and a lug-to-lug of 44.6 millimeters. More on kind of this top to bottom measurement in a bit, because that is important. Finishing on the case is still one of the best you're gonna find for the price. In a price arena where many brands go on the cheap for straps and bracelets, the PRX manages to separate itself from the crowd. The central case comes with uniform vertical brush surfaces that extend throughout the bracelet. All of the sides of the main surfaces are polished, including the bezel that is lifted from the core case, and a long bevel casts along the entire length of that case and shines rather impressively under the light. The The crown at the 3 o'clock position is seated within the case slightly, offering a compromise between protection and accessibility while also being signed with the Tissot T. The bracelet seamlessly transitions to the case and demonstrates how Tissot really did not cut any corners in making this one. The same brushing on the central case is here, but to add some flair, the inside of the links are all polished, making the turn of the wrist or the watch under the light showing its reflective details. The bracelet tapers down heavily at a 2-button butterfly release, features pin adjustable links, and quick release spring bars on the back of the bracelet. The links are rather small compared to other traditional sports watches, so you shouldn't have any issue in getting a solid fit, but there are no points of micro adjustment in the bracelet. So if you are someone that needs the ability to resize quickly, keep this in mind, as that is an important point here. I don't want to belabor this point too much because I did talk about it in my previous PRX review, but it is very critical to stress the importance when going with an integrated bracelet. One should analyze it underneath a more critical level of expectations, because as a wearer, your alternatives are not as easy to come by. In say sub $1,000 range, there is an unfortunate kind of stance I think many brands take, some perhaps unintentionally, thinking that consumers will just change the straps anyway, so who cares? But with a bracelet that forms to the case in a custom way like this, you need a bracelet that is also going to be quality, as you are essentially married to the thing. But as previously expressed with the PRX, I thought this was the best bracelet for a watch in this style for under $400, giving watches more than double the price a run for their money. Now there is a price increase here, and this case in almost every aspect is exactly the same, so the Quartz is giving you a bit more just case for money, but still for the money, this is a great bracelet, and given its wear and breathability, finish, you still will be hard pressed to find a better integrated style bracelet design for the same or lesser value, unless you are looking at that Quartz version. One final point on wear that is unique to this piece is that lug to lug distance, as it doesn't really tell the complete story. The lug to lug does measure out at 44.6 millimeters in that distance, but the end link that meets the case is fixed and slanted down, so if you do measure it out to that full distance, it is going to add a bit more to the length, measuring at 51 millimeters. Now, given the curving down of that link and not being part of the central case, it is not going to wear like a true 51, but it is important context for setting proper wearing expectations. Simply put, I wouldn't classify this watch as small, wearing closer to that of a 41 millimeter case, still wearable, but that fixed end link is a point to consider as well. Across all three of these models, there is a raised flat sapphire crystal that gives us view of the surface underneath. So upon quick inspection, the dial surface is going to be the main area of separation from the previous Quartz models. The Quartz lineup comes with more sunburst finish with no texture, while the automatics come with a waffle finish. This textured finish does lean a bit more into that steel sports line of influence compared to the Quartz versions, yet does offer a bit more of an elevated surface finish, and I can see from Tissot's perspective wanting to differentiate these just a bit more from those Quartz variants. The dials are accompanied by applied steel markers with brush and polished surfaces to match the case, a steel frame date window at the 3, and the printing of Tissot at the 12, with the writing of PRX in a retro style text right above the writing of Powermatic 80, alluding to the movement within. All the hour markers do contain superluminova, as well as the minute and hour hands at the center, with a thin stainless steel second hand sweeping along the minute track at the dial outskirts in order to discern the precise time. The lume contained within the markers shines adequately, but given the surface area, it's not gonna shine as brightly as the hands at the center, but still should do the job as this kind of hybridized style just sports watch. But let's cut to the chase. The biggest differentiator here when it comes to this new version of the PRX is the automatic movement within, being the reliable and frequently used Tissot Powermatic 80.111. This movement is being featured in models such as the C-Star, among many others, and is a straightforward Powermatic movement, with this one not coming with a fancy cost certification, but it is built off the reliable ETA movement architecture that is modified in order to obtain its impressive 80 hours of power reserve. In short, reducing the 28,800 vibrations per hour with that beat rate of the bass and dropping it down to 21,600 vibrations per hour or 3 hertz to maximize that reserve of that mainspring is going to double that power reserve. These movements are also equipped with a patented Nimicron balance spring that helps in the basic protection against shock and magnetism, while also being laser regulated at the factory, which does drop the traditional regulator pins as a side note. So if you are going to do any regulating yourself, that is something to keep in mind, so it's not as straightforward as some others, but it does help against the resistance against shock, and they are fine-tuning and adjusting these in the factory. It probably goes without being said that in terms of accuracy, the Powermatic 80 will not be able to stack up against the Quartz version, but then again, the reason for going mechanical in the first place is not a logical one, and Tissot offers a great level of reliability with their movements for the price. All right, so now let's first discuss this idea about why these watches, who are these for, who are they not for, and then get into the idea mechanical versus quartz. So are these watches entirely original in their design? That would be no. And with that, they're not gonna be everyone's cup of tea given their inspiration from more expensive steel sports watches with integrated bracelets. But does Tissot have an archive with watches mirroring these from decades ago? Yes. And is there an appetite for this style of watch? Absolutely. And high horology brands, as their variants continue to become increasingly out of reach, these begin to make even more sense. A couple general points to consider, and I would say most of this is gonna come down to wear. When you're going for this integrated style, you always really wanna make sure that you're getting a bracelet design that you feel comfortable with. The wear is gonna be nice on the wrist. This does wear closer to a 41, so that's something to consider. And then fine tuning that bracelet, you're not gonna have the added benefit of micro adjustment. But in terms of the case finish and the finishing, even with these increase in price and mostly being the same as that quartz version, still really stacks up well against the competition. But now the idea, quartz version or automatic version. Say you like these designs, you wanna make them yours. These have become incredibly popular and people really do love them, and for good reason. I think they're cool looking watches for what they are. And when looking at this, you can probably look at this logically and just look all the way towards the quartz. It's gonna be cheaper, case finish is relatively the same, not gonna change much in wearability, and you're getting a more accurate movement. But as mentioned a little bit earlier, when looking at mechanical watches in general, it is not a logical pursuit to begin with. So if you love all things mechanical, you also like the up finish with kind of that dial surface treatment with this kind of waffle style pattern, and you just simply don't like quartz watches as much, it makes a ton of sense to go for the mechanical route. But if you are the logical frame of mind and just want the best bang for buck, the quartz option is probably gonna be better for you. Regardless of which option you go for, if you do like this kind of style and design, I think these are the two best ones, probably under $1,000. There are some other variants as you start getting up into that $1,000 to $2,000 range. But if you're just looking to have some fun, you like this design and don't wanna just cough up a ton of change in regards to buying one compared to what else is out there, the PRXs make a ton of sense, and this new mechanical option, I know for many enthusiasts out there, has been long awaited, and it's good to see it finally here. All right, guys, well, I'd love to see comments down below. What do you think of these new Tissot PRX versions? How do you like them in comparison to the previous quartz versions? Which one would you go for? Love to see comments down below. Also, if you did enjoy it, thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Really would appreciate that as well. And if you like what you saw from these watches today and you're in the market for them, definitely check them out at teddybaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of Tissot watches. In addition, if you guys want to stay up to date with the content, definitely follow on Instagram as well. I've been posting quite some awesome photos of watches, if I do say so for myself, so definitely go follow there in addition to being subscribed here. And then also be sure to take part in our upcoming giveaway, giving away a watch up to $1,600, so stay tuned for that as well. Fill out the form, follow all the instructions. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.